This is definitely not the recap I wanted to do today, but unfortunately, it has to be done. Chargers take a bad loss in New England, losing 16-3 to the Patriots. Just an atrocious game on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, the Chargers look really good, but that was not enough to get a win in Foxborough last night. So it's on to the offseason for the Chargers. And a lot of things are going to have to change this offseason, but we'll talk about that when we get there. In this episode, we are going to recap last night's game against the Patriots, talk about the good, talk about a lot of the bad, go through the box score, go through team stats, and then we'll go through some PFF grades and what's on the horizon next for the Chargers as they head into the offseason. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Let's Charge Podcast on YouTube. You can also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also follow me on socials. I'm at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. And before I go any further, I do want to just point a few things out. Want to thank everyone who joined my live stream yesterday from the DHBC watch party. First live stream ever. Have a little bit of things to work through for the next ones. But if you did tune in and you joined the live chat, really appreciate it. So thank you so much for tuning in. Also want to mention that I was at the fan rally at the Bowl on Friday. Super cool experience. The Chargers did a great job with it. If you haven't seen on my socials, I did get called up on stage because I answered some trivia correctly. And I did win a pair of Sony headphones. So really cool experience there. Hopefully the Chargers do continue fan events like this in the future. A great experience, and it was cool to be. I wasn't inside the Bowl, but inside the confines of the Bowl. Kudos to the Chargers there. All right, so we got a lot to go through, a lot to talk through in this episode. This is a venting session for all Charger fans. We will overcome this loss, but it's a tough one to sit with this morning because, I thought that the Chargers had a great matchup going into it and it was a winnable game. With that being said, let's jump into this episode. All right, as I mentioned, the Chargers lose 16-3 in Foxborough last night. Just an abysmal game by this Chargers offense. Seemed like no adjustments could be made. There was a quote after the game from Robert Spillane that he talked to some of the offensive players on the Chargers, and the Chargers offense had no idea what defense the Patriots were in. So that just speaks volumes in the level of preparation that Greg Roman and this offense had going into Sunday. And a lot of Charger fans wanted this matchup. I talked about it on my show. Yes, I thought it was an okay matchup, but learning my lesson from last year with the Texans game, all the teams going into the playoffs are going to be tough. Last year, everyone wanted Houston. We got Houston, and we got blown out of the building. This year, a lot of people wanted the Patriots, and you wound up with another loss. Herbert's now 0-3 in his playoff career, so that narrative will continue to be there until something changes, which sucks. You look at how this team played defensively. This team held their own against a top 5 offense in the NFL. Just offensively could not get things going and get some points on the board. The offense failed to score a touchdown. They were in the red zone twice, and I talked about this on my pregame show. Playing a team like the Patriots, you have to put 7 on the board. And it's the same song and dance with this Chargers offense in the red zone that they cannot figure it out or get creative in their play calling to get guys open in the end zone. This has been a thorn in the Chargers side all year with their red zone offense. Greg Roman is so predictable, throws the mesh routes, has a couple runs up the middle, or he'll be at the 1-yard line and doesn't want to run the ball. Now, they had that 4th and 1 where this was after the Henley pick. And I thought, yes, it's an aggressive move. I wish they would just push Herbert into the end zone for that one. But in hindsight, the final score, they would still be down some points. But we'll talk about Greg Roman and this offensive play calling here in a little bit. But just abysmal in the red zone, especially going against a Patriots defense who has struggled in their red zone defense. Couldn't put the ball in the end zone. One field goal all game was under the 20. I think it was a 20-something yarder made by Cam Dicker. Justin Herbert had a bad game. I think it was 19-31, 159 pass yards. He led the team in rushing. I think this is his 8th game this year where he's led the Chargers in rushing. He falls to 0-3 in his playoff career, which sucks. I hate that this narrative continues for him, but I think he would agree that this wasn't his best game by any stretch of imagination. He finished last in PFF grading for the Chargers offensively, and we'll touch on those grades here a little bit later on this episode. But Herbert has played hero ball a lot for this team, and it just shows when he's not at the top of his game, this offense can't get anything going. But to caveat that, I thought the play calling last night was really bad as well. This team wasn't efficient at all. They were 1 for 10 on third downs. That's uncharacteristic of this team. I think on the year they were in the mid 40s converting on third down. Just couldn't get anything going there. And Herbert took 6 sacks yesterday, 30 pressures on him. And just to paint the picture, right? He had 30 pressures last night and he had 31 dropbacks. So how do you get things going when you're under constant pressure? And it wasn't from their edges. It was the interior pressure that got to him. Milton Williams got to him. I mean, he just trying to make things happen and play hero ball and just wasn't happening against his defense last night. Yeah. And then I have here, critical missed opportunities. The red zone offense was just atrocious, abysmal. But it's been the same way all year for this offense. They've had a hard time finding ways to put the ball in the end zone when they're underneath the 20. All right, let's move on to the defense. So the defense was definitely the bright spot of this game yesterday for the Chargers. If Jesse Minter was going into Sunday having questions about his coaching ability, I think his stock went through the roof after that defensive performance yesterday by the Chargers. Holding an offense that can put up 30 points easily to only 16 points speaks volumes. Defense was competitive for the 3 quarters. They gave up that touchdown in the 4th. It happens, but still, they only give up 16 points. You should be able to put up 16 points in the game. They held that New England offense to 9 points entering the 4th quarter. So it was still a 1-score game. And, go back to the offense. Just nothing was being adjusted on the offensive side of the ball. And I'll talk about that when we get to my thoughts, because I do have a lot to say about the play calling and the offensive adjustments that weren't made. Early impact play. I mean, Tier Tart tipped that pass. Dayon had the pick. They were set up in the red zone, gave their offense a prime opportunity to put points on the board, came up empty. Defense forced 2 turnovers. Pick on May, then they had a fumble. May fumbled the ball twice, and I talked about this in my pregame episode that I thought he was going to fumble the ball. If you get pressure on him, he's prone to fumbling, and the Chargers did get him to fumble twice. One was recovered by the Patriots, and one was recovered by the Chargers. They also got 5 sacks on May. Odafe Owe had a phenomenal game last night. 3 sacks on him. The Chargers need to give him a check in the offseason and keep him around because he proved his worth last night against the Patriots. Some big plays for the Patriots last night, that 48-yard catch and run by Ramondre Stevenson, which turned into 3 points for the Pats. And then that late touchdown to Hunter Henry put the Pats up 16-3. There wasn't many defensive breakdowns yesterday. They kept the run game in check for the Patriots. May had over 200 yards passing. We'll go through that full box score, but I thought the Chargers defense did a great job limiting the explosive plays that have really defined the Patriots' offensive performance this year. All right, let's talk about my initial thoughts because I got a lot to say, and I always try to make sure I don't have an emotional approach to it, and I really think things through because I think if I did this episode right after last night's loss, I'd kind of be all over the place, but had some time to really digest all the information that was coming out, and this is what I got to. So, like I mentioned, 31 pass attempts, 30 pressures. I mean, I don't know how you operate an offense efficiently. And with the pressure all night, it seemed like nothing was open for the Chargers underneath in that offense. There was no quick throws. It just seemed like everything was developing downfield. Wide receivers were not getting open. I think there was a lot of man coverage being played yesterday by that Patriots defense. Christian Gonzalez was shutting down QJ. Just nothing could get open, and there's no adjustments made. How do you expect to win games when you make 0 adjustments based on what the defense is showing you? To caveat that, the Chargers offense had no idea what the Patriots defense was doing. Greg Roman's been around this game for way too long to not be able to make those adjustments and create some momentum on the offensive side of the ball. You look at that last drive of the game for the Chargers, and they start going to the quick passes. Where was that all game? If the up-tempo started to work, why wouldn't you try that? No, it was the same song and dance for 3.5 quarters until you got into desperation mode and you started to go up-tempo, you started to have quick passes, and you started to actually move the ball down the field. There was one stat that I had retweeted on X, and let me pull it up here. So from the 1 minute, 11 second mark of the second quarter to the 5 minute and 39 second mark of the fourth quarter against the Patriots, the Chargers did not record a single pass yard. So you almost went a quarter and a half of not having a single pass yard in this game. Remarkable. I touched on the hero ball piece, right? Herbert has played a ton of hero ball this year, and he's had to. You have the 30th ranked offensive line. Your receivers have issues getting open when they play against a good defense. I think back to that Philly game where nothing was open downfield as well. But it goes back also to the play calling. And Herbert couldn't get it done. There were some uncharacteristic throws by him, overthrowing receivers, throwing fireballs. I'm not gonna get too much on his case. Now, he is at fault for some of this, but it is a collective effort on the offensive side of the ball that they could not get things done yesterday. Talk about Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's been as reliable as they come for this Chargers offense. He had 8 targets yesterday and he only had 3 receptions. He had some bad drops. He had a wide open drop on 3rd down, which was converted. Just uncharacteristic play by him as well. The run game, once again, was non-existent. Justin Herbert was the lead running back. Hampton logged only 2 snaps yesterday, and I have to wait to see what Harbaugh says about him. He wasn't asked about it, I don't think, on his press conference last night, so I don't know if he's going to talk today because I know they got in super early Monday, probably like 4:35 a.m.-ish from the East Coast. So we'll see what they have to say about Hampton, but Vidal was the lead back yesterday for the Chargers, and he was pretty underwhelming, to say the least. I already mentioned Herbert led the team in rushing. I think this 8th game this year that he's led the team in rushing. Offense was extremely inefficient on 3rd down. Like I said, 1 for 10, uncharacteristic of them. They're in top 5, I think, this year, converting on 3rd down, just around 45, 46%. As I mentioned, talk about the defense. I think Odafe Owe must be extended this offseason. The trade for him was a phenomenal trade by Joe Ortiz, and he is that edge rusher that the Chargers definitely need. There's questions about if Khalil Mack comes back or if the Chargers want him back, but I think it's a must based on his performance last night and just his performance in general coming over from the Ravens, of how well he's played. He needs to be extended this offseason. We've talked about this way too many times on this show. We cannot run it back with this same interior offensive line. I think the Chargers fan base will implode if they see the same 3 interior offensive linemen come back next year. It is a disservice to your $250 million quarterback to have those 3 interior offensive linemen back. Now, luckily, fingers crossed, you get Alton Slater back as your tackles. Zion's going to be a free agent. I think Penning's a free agent. Ellie Bozeman has another year in his contract. So does Mekhi Becton. I think Becton is going to be cut. You need to build in the draft. Your 1st-round pick should be a guard. It should be Vega. I can't pronounce his full name. Not even going to try. Out of Penn State. That's who I'm going with in the 1st round if he's available. If there isn't a quality offensive lineman available in the 1st round, you definitely have to go with someone on the defensive line. The hot name in free agency for the Chargers is the center from the Ravens, Tyler Lindenbaum. There's also a couple other decent centers that the Chargers should take a look at. I go back to the center from Buffalo, McGovern. But if Joe Ortiz comes out and says, I thought we did pretty well, we got 11 wins pop once again, I think this fan base may implode. It's just a poor mentality to have when you have teams in your division that go to the Super Bowl and you're okay settling with 11 wins. Now, the Chargers are going to have a ton of cap space going into this free agency. I think they're in the top 3. I think they're going to have like $110 million going into free agency. Also, some key players, their salaries dropped this year. I know Herbert this year made $60 million. Next year, I think he makes $24 million. The same with Slater. I think it drops to close to $18 million. Got to confirm those figures, but they're going to have a lot of money to play with, and I really hope ownership is on board with spending some money, really beefing up, 1, this offensive line, but 2, the defensive line as well. But we will talk about free agency and the draft in another episode during this offseason, so we'll go into depth on those 2 pieces. But I think everyone is aware that the Chargers offensive line is atrocious and adjustments need to be made, or Justin Herbert is on a trajectory to ask for a trade or be in the same boat as Andrew Luck. And one of the questions, it's been all over X since the beginning of this game last night, is about Greg Roman. I thought the play calling was bad last night. No receivers are getting open, no quick plays. The run game was inefficient. This is year 2 of the Greg Roman offense, and Harbaugh came in saying, we want to rely on the run game. Well, the run game can't be Justin Herbert. I'm sorry. The run game starts up front with your offensive line. There's too many good offensive-minded former head coaches or coordinators out there that the Chargers at least should consider. Mike McDaniel, he'll probably get a head coaching job, but he's available. He's getting an interview with Detroit as their OC. You got someone like Brian Daboll, who's let go by the Giants. He worked well with Josh Allen. He's someone to consider. And Jim Harbaugh last night in his post-game press conference was very non-committal about the play calling on offense. Chris Stream of ESPN asked him about if there needs to be a change with the play calling, and Jim Harbaugh said, "I'm not going to comment on it," which is very uncharacteristic of him. And it comes down to, yes, I know he's extremely loyal to Greg Roman, but if you want to win, I think some changes need to be made. And I think a lot of the fan base would agree, but we'll see what happens. And maybe ownership gets involved and does talk about a change. But there's a real possibility that the Chargers lose both their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator in this offseason. But we will keep an eye on that and see what transpires as the offseason progresses into free agency and the draft. Okay, let's switch over to the box score real quick. Let's run through these numbers. So Justin Herbert last night, 19 of 31, 159 yards. 6 sacks for 39 yards, rating of 74.5, a QBR of 25. Rushing for the Chargers, Justin Herbert led all rushers, 10 carries for 57 yards. Kamani Vidal, 11 carries for 31 yards. Hampton, 1 carry for -1 yard. Receiving, Ladd McConkey, 3 for 32. Rondé Gatson, 3 for 30. Keenan Allen, 3 for 25. Just look, 8 targets for Keenan Allen, only 3 catches. Kamani Vidal, 2 for 20. Trey Harris, 2 for 20. Quentin Johnson, 3 for 20. Quentin Johnson was targeted 6 times. Tucker Fisk, 3 for 12. Over to the Patriots. Drake May, 17 of 29, 268, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 5 sacks. QBR of 68.9 and a rating of 86.6. Drake May also led rushing for New England, 10 carries for 66 yards. I thought the Chargers defense did a great job stopping Stevenson and Henderson. They've been very explosive this year, so great run defense for this Chargers team, I thought. Drake May broke off some runs where the defense was in some deep coverage and he got free, but I thought they did a great job stopping those 2 running backs. So, receiving for New England, Ramondre Stevenson, 3 for 75. Booty, 4 for 66. Hunter Henry, 3 for 64 with the touchdown. Chisholm, 1 for 20. Stephon Diggs, they really limited him, 2 for 16. And then you have some other guys here with 1 catch. But offensively for the Patriots, 146 rush yards, passing 268. And then for the Chargers, 87 yards rushing and 159 yards passing. So let's switch over to team stats here. The big number here, first downs, pretty even. The third down efficiency is bad. 1 for 10 for the Chargers, like I mentioned. 4 for 11 for the Pats. Fourth down efficiency, the Chargers were 1 for 3. Patriots, 1 for 1. Ran equal amount of plays, 59 to 64. Total yards, Chargers had 207. Patriots had 381. 10 total drives for both teams. Red zone attempts, both teams were inefficient. Chargers over 2, Pats over 3. Penalties last night, 4 for 20 for the Chargers, 2 for 35 for the Patriots. So pretty clean game as far as penalties. Turnovers, the Chargers had 1 was that fumble lost by Herbert. Patriots had 2 turnovers, 1 fumble lost and 1 pick. And then time possession, Chargers had almost 28 minutes time possession, where the Patriots had 32 minutes. All right, let's switch over to PFF grades. Yeah, pretty rough. And just an FYI, average grade in PFF is 60. So you had most of your team, at least offensively, below that mark. Your best offensive lineman last night was Trey Pipkins, rated at a 74. Mekhi Becton is second with 63.8. Gatson third, 61.1. Trevor Penning, 60.4. And Tucker Fisk rounds out top 5, 60.3. Bottom 5, Herbert finished dead last, 29.7. His pass grade is 27.5. Bradley Bozeman, 41.3. Scott Matlock, 42.6. Jamari Salyer, 50.3. And Keenan Allen, 52.3. Just nothing good to talk about here. Let's switch over to the defense. Top 5 defensively for the Chargers. Tier Tart at 89.0. Odafe Owe at 81. Deion Henley at 81. Delshon Phillips, 70.8. Ben St. Juste at 69.1. Delshon Phillips, he was in yesterday for Bud Dupree, who was ruled out prior to the game. Bottom 5, Troy Dye, 36.2. Elijah Molden, 38.5. Justin Aboibe, 47.3. Derwin James, 48.5. And Khalil Mack at 50.5. Like I said, some bright spots definitely on the defense last night, but just not enough to get it done and get a win in Foxborough. So unfortunately, this is the way the Chargers season ends. 11-6 record in the regular season. Justin Herbert falls to 0-3 in his playoff career. Harbaugh is 0-2 in the playoffs with the Chargers. Changes need to be made in the offseason, and we'll see what this team does. I'm interested to see what happens in the press conference, end of year press conference. That will probably with Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh. Really looking forward to what they have to say in all aspects of this team. Tough loss today. A lot of things could have turned the Chargers' way, but didn't, and that's just how football goes, unfortunately. But we will be talking more about free agency and the draft and what the Chargers should be doing. Looking forward to next season in some future episodes of the Electric Edge podcast. Unfortunately, this is the last game recap I'll have until the preseason rolls around in late July, early August. But I'll be putting out a ton more content during the offseason. We'll be doing some live streams as well. So be on the lookout for all that content coming your way. Appreciate everyone who has followed the podcast through the season. It's been a ton of fun for me. It keeps you super engaged with the Chargers, and I really appreciate every single one of you who tunes into the show week in and week out to hear me talk everything about Chargers football. So that being said, if you haven't already, be sure to like, subscribe to Electric Edge Podcast on YouTube. Also listen on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Follow me on socials at Electric Edge Pod on X, TikTok, and Instagram. And Charger fans, I want to hear from you. Let me know your thoughts on last night's game in Foxborough against the Patriots. Let me know in the comments what you think the priorities of the Chargers need to be in this offseason going forward to set this team up on a course for success. Quite frankly, the schedule gets harder next year. If you take a look at some of the opponents, they're going to play the NFC West. They got to play Baltimore. They got to play the Bucs. They're going to play, obviously, their division games. So it doesn't get easier next season. So what do the Chargers need to do to, one, make the playoffs again next season, but two, actually win the AFC West next season? So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And like I said, we're going to have a ton more discussions on this Chargers offseason ahead, along with the upcoming draft. So as always, Charger fans, thank you so much for tuning into Electric Edge Podcast. And as always, go Chargers and bolt up.